Hi, so my name's Dino Everett from the PMRC, and thought it was time to do another record collecting video. Last time I got a response from Michael Scholar telling me that I had left out the Smash the State book all about Canadian punk records. I thought to prove that the only reason I left it out was because I've never been able to find a copy. And not because I don't value Canadian punk. I thought I would prove this by doing a overview of one of my favorite Canadian punk bands, the Viletones. Obviously, one of the original '77 Toronto punk bands. So let's get into it. So obviously, they started with their first single, one of the greatest punk singles ever, which is "Screamin Fist," "Possibilities," and I forget the third song, "Rebel." "Rebel." This is absolutely one of my favorite punk singles, and I have a little bit of a controversy about it that I want to point out to you. If for some reason you're not, familiar with the Viletones and you want to get a good history of them, I would recommend the Liz Worth book, "Treat Me Like Dirt," which has some. It's kind of written in the style of "Please Kill Me," where it's quotes from all the people that were there. This is a really great book. And then Don Pyle's photo book has a bunch of really good photographs from the scene with the Viletones. Both feature the Viletones, of course. So the Viletones, when they were around, they only really put out two singles. They put out the "Screamin Fist" single and then the "Look Back in Anger" single. Only two records the band ever put out. You might be saying to yourself, that's not true. They also put out the Saturday Night, Sunday Morning album. To me, I don't consider this a Viletones album. I consider this a Stephen Leckie album with other people. So I don't think that counts. So they only put out the two singles during their existence. Times started changing, and eventually, I was not listening to the Viletones that often, through the 80s, and then into the 90s. I think it was around 97 when I was in Tower Records on Sunset. A Taste of Honey CD came out, and I was blown away because here was a full CD with all these songs I had never heard before. And I was so excited, bought the CD, left the store, popped it in. "Screamin Fist" comes on, and I noticed something that jumped out at me after having listened to the single so many times. I heard something in the beginning of "Screamin Fist" that sounded odd to me, where I'm someone who has dealt with a lot of like audio reel tape, like quarter-inch tape, cassettes, and things like that. And so when Freddie Pompey hits a note and it's feeding back on the Taste of Honey CD, there's a dip, and it jumped out at me, and I was like, that sounds like there's like a kink in the tape. Like if you folded the audio tape, it's not gonna make solid contact with the head, and you would have like a little bit of a dip. And so for years, this was just something that I was thinking about, and I kept expecting somebody to write about it or pick up on it, and nobody ever did. And then finally, when we started getting digital tools on the computer, I compared a digitized version of the original single to a digitized version of "Taste of Honey," and I noticed that there's a little gap, and I'll show it to you right here. Again, like I even contacted their old manager Tibor and asked him, "Do you know if there's a sort of a crinkle in that original quarter-inch mix down tape, and he didn't know, he hadn't seen it since back in the day. And nobody's ever, like I said, nobody's ever written about it. So this is just something that I had tucked away. And then over the years, versions like Viletones records started coming out. I don't know, I can't remember which one of these was first, but you have this one, It's My Party and I'll Die If I Want To, which was a compilation of basically all the same tracks from the Taste of Honey CD. And this one, Barry's Screamin' Fifth, like fifth song, but this one has the dip. Then this other one that I think people just call the Red Album, another one, it's a bootleg compilation of all the tracks. This one also has the dip. And then finally, a couple of years ago, which I think out of all of these sounds the best, the Florida Mall compilation, again, has the dip on Screamin' Fist. If you're curious about the three versions, I would say Florida Mall sounds the best, then the Red Album is second, and then the This Is My Party is probably third. And so I started thinking about like, what's the deal? And again, all of this is just my hypothesis, is that probably when they were making the Taste of Honey CD, they digitized the quarter-inch tape, probably made a DAT or something, and everybody's just been using that same DAT. Or with the bootlegs, maybe they did a needle drop or something version of ripping the CD and put it down on vinyl. So what I've come down to is, if you really want to hear Screamin' Fist, the proper sort of interfered with version, you have to either get the original single, or there was this company in Canada called Montreco that was releasing sort of budget versions of some of the cool singles back then. And it came out in, I think, 78, or maybe it came out in 77. I'm bad with dates, but this one and the original single are the only ways to hear the clear version of Screamin' Fist. There was another single that came out like a couple of years back, where they redid Screamin' Fist. This one also has the dip in the song. So the only way to get the unaffected Screamin' Fist is one of those two original singles. And I feel like once you hear it, it jumps out at you. But apparently no one else sort of is annoyed by this or picks up on this, because I've never really heard anyone else talking about it. Okay, so other news in the Viletones world, I would say, being an archivist, one of the things that sort of always bothers me is people rewriting history. And Stephen Leckie is somebody that I completely admire. I think he's one of the greatest frontmen that's ever existed. But he's also a bit of a braggart. And if you read, any of the histories of the Viletones, he's always been running around saying, I did everything, I wrote everything. And I personally have always been a huge Freddie Pompey fan. And I just, I never believed that this guy who didn't play any instruments was writing all the songs. And you've got this guy, Freddie Pompey, who's this killer guitar player. He'd been in bands before, and he wasn't writing the songs. So at one point, I thought, and even like in the Treat Me Like Dirt book, it points out that other people were saying, Steven claims he wrote everything and he didn't. And there's even like an old issue of Shades magazine, which was one of the fanzines out of Canada, that has a great article that probably was the beginning of the end for the Viletones, because the writer sort of points out that like they always thought that Freddie Pompey was the leader of the Viletones anyway. And for someone like Steven, just like it would probably be the same thing for Johnny Rotten, where that's going to annoy them to no end. And, then it's going to make them double down on their claims of I did everything. So I thought like, oh, let's look at like the songwriting credits on all the Viletones releases and see if anything changes. And this is how nerdy I am. And just to prove to you, yeah, I value Canadian punk. This is a little spreadsheet that I created where I went through all the different releases and saw where the songwriting credits changed. So, for instance, on the original single, it's credited to Lecky, Pasquale, which is Freddie, Haight, and Anderson. By the Taste of Honey CD, Possibilities was credited only to Lecky. And then on the Fleur de Mal album, I think they were smart in that rather than writing a bunch of bogus songwriting credits, they just left all the songwriting credits off the album. A couple of the other ones that changed, Screamin Fist started out as a Lecky, Freddie Pompey composition on the first single, but by Taste of Honey, it was now Lecky and Haight, which is weird. Another one, Danger Boy, on Look Back, it was credited to Lecky and Pompey. Oddly enough, on the Saturday Night, Sunday Morning album, they added Haight's name. But then, of course, by Taste of Honey, it's solely credited to Steve Lecky. And yeah, just to let you know, I mean, that's the kind of thing that, as an archivist, annoys me, which is changing history. It's like, whatever your fights are with other band members, it doesn't mean they didn't write the songs that they wrote. And so that has always kind of annoyed me and sort of soured my view of Stephen Lecky, because like, he doesn't need to do that. He's one of the greatest frontmen ever. It's like his legacy is ensured. So if you want Viletones, like completists like me, especially speaking of completists, there's always been rumors of live tapes, and I've never been able to find any. So if anybody has live tapes of the Viletones, I would kill to get a copy of them. Outside of the compilation albums, the Taste of Honey CD and stuff, there is another single that has come out that has three tracks on it. Heinrich Himmler, trying to think what else. Heinrich Himmler, Auschwitz Jerk, and Swastika Girl. So I could see maybe why those three didn't make the earlier cuts on some of the albums. On the albums, obviously, you have a limited amount of time, but they probably could have fit it on the Taste of Honey. But it's like, just like Stephen Lecky changed his name from Nazi Dog, they probably didn't want to release a bunch of, Nazi glorifying songs that long after the 70s, because most people don't understand the shock value that it was used for in the 70s. But it's out there. I believe this is a kind of like a maybe authorized bootleg. But if you want to be a completist, you can find this record out there as well. So as a Viletones sort of super fan, and Freddie Pompey in general, I'm one of those people that always does a deep dive. And so I did a deep dive with them to see, okay, what else have they done? Obviously, The Secrets, which I'll get to in a second, but they had done bands before the Viletones. Freddie Pompey had a band called Bubble, and put out a single in, I'm not sure exactly the date because, like I said, I'm terrible with dates, but it's Cho-Cho on one side, and the A side is actually I Call Her Lady. And I feel like it's like a lot of singles where the A side is the attempt to make like a radio hit. So for me, the A side I don't really like, but the Cho-Cho side is great because it's got like a cool fuzz guitar, and you can pick this record up for fairly cheap. So it's great. And then one of the other musicians that had like a previous history was Chris Haight, where he had a couple of bands. He had an early band called Everyday People that, funny enough, when I played this record, my wife, who's not like a big punk fan to begin with, this record, she said her ears bleed. Because yeah, it's pretty sappy stuff. But there was a couple of tracks on there that I liked. I Get a Feeling I kind of liked, and Music Man. I enjoyed those two tracks. But this is early Chris Haight. And then he had like right around the time of the Viletones, like right before, he had a band called Zoom that was kind of a weird new wavy band before there was the like new wave. They put out Sweet Desperation single, and then recently somebody has put out a Sweet Desperation compilation with all their tracks. It's decent, it's quirky and weird, but it's definitely not Viletones by any means. As for Freddie Pompey, he kept active after the Viletones, and for a while he had a fantastic band called the Immaculate Hearts. Put out a handful of singles, and there's there's like a kind of bootleggy CD compilation that goes around with basically all their tracks. And this was kind of like a super group where it was Freddie Pompey from the Viletones and D-Pop from the Bush Tetras playing drums. But yeah, I recommend all three of these singles. And then shortly before he passed away, he was in a band called the Snake Oilers that put out this Fight Fucker Dance single, Feeling Dirty. I think everything Freddie Pompey has ever done is just fantastic. And that sort of brings me to The Secrets, which if you read the history and everything, again, it's like, I think Steven's ego was so fragile that he didn't want them doing anything else musical, so they sort of snuck off and called themselves The Secrets so that they could play without him, with Freddie as the singer. And they put out some killer records. There is their single version of Pretty Woman, which is great. And then, of course, they put out an album that has some killer songs like Susie Peroxide, Teenage Rampage. This album is just great. Like, Freddie just has this kind of urban street vibe, and everything musical he does has that vibe to it. And I think that's why the Viletones were so good, and that's why the Secrets are so good. And then if you are a completist, again, like me, there's a couple of compilations that you want to pick up, and you can get these pretty cheap. There's the And Now Live from Toronto that has the Secrets on it, and the No Pedestrians that has the Secrets on it as well. And so there it is. I mean, that's my deep dive into the Viletones. I love Canadian punk. I've never been able to find the Smash the State book. I love the Viletones, Teenage Head, of course, The Curse. Like, there's so many great Canadian punk bands and I forgot. And then, yeah, there's a CD, the Secrets Teenage Rampage, that has like everything on it. So if you want to just get everything in one fell swoop, you can get the CD. All right, so that's it. Again, obviously, I'm not looking to do commercials and content, so that's why things are so infrequent. But if you enjoyed this, subscribe. I'll do some more coming up. I have a couple of ideas. Not everyone's so long as this one. I've got like some little short ones that I can do too. But thanks for watching.
Oh, and I forgot to add that there's some great footage of the Viletones on YouTube. There's the Peter Vronsky film Crash and Burn. There's a good CBC news story on punk. And of course, Susan Naughton's 1978 Super 8 film, An Afternoon with the Viletones at New Rose, that if anybody out there knows Suzanne, I would love to get my hands on that film and do a nice 4K restoration of that Super 8 film. But yeah, there's lots of great footage of them on YouTube.